I would now like to invite our last speaker for the day, Mr. Eric van den Heuvel, who is the technical coordinator of the IA Bioenergy Technology Collaboration Platform. He's an international expert on sustainable energy, low carbon solutions, bio-based society, and bioenergy. Um, he acts as a part-time director of the Knowledge and Innovation Netherlands platform, Renewable Fuels as well. Mr. Heuvel, thank you for your patience again. And I would now like to hand over the floor to you to proceed.
Thank you very much. I will see that I can share my screen.
Yes.
And I think you will see it now, right?
Yes, it's visible. I can hear you as well.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you. Yeah, as you said, I will detail a bit on the aviation and SAF activities within our IEA Bioenergy Network. Um, uh, just briefly, IEA Bioenergy Network is an international collaboration program under the auspices of the International Energy Agency, but it's an independent network of 24 member countries. Now, 23 member countries and the European Union, European Commission, collaborating on all aspects from bioenergy, focusing on collaboration and information exchange, mainly from the research perspective, going through the total value chain. It covers, I think, all continents. So it's very international, and that helps actually to exchange the knowledge that is generated in the various tasks. We work on tasks, and I can show you its working groups where the countries participate in. Here you see the distribution of where the members are located. A high concentration in the member countries of the European Union, but indeed Canada, US, Brazil, and the Americas. And in the Asia and the Pacific, it's Japan, Korea, China, India, Australia, New Zealand. From Africa, only South Africa is member, but in total, it is really a very international setting. The tasks are distributed on topics either from the resource feedstock base via conversion routes that are several going to the various markets where they are then deploying the bioenergy, and we have a look on system perspectives. We work in 3-year programs, and indeed I as technical coordinator check also how the various tasks, and task 39 is a special one, that works on transport biofuels, how they actually can exchange the information and bring that information to the policymakers and also to the industry to make sure that they base their decisions on well-founded and evidence-based information. Task 39, as I said, is one of the biggest tasks where most of the countries also participate in. And it actually has, let's say, for the next this year and the next 2 years, a very strong focus on implementing an agenda, including emerging markets, and we discussed about them today already. We keep and maintain a advanced biofuels demonstration database. You can find it in this location. The slides will be shared. Here you have just a screenshot from that overview, gives a very good idea, not only on SAF, but all kinds of biofuels and biorefinery activities. It's worthwhile to have a visit to. We're going to look at especially renewable fuels for the heavy-duty diesel market and for the jet sectors. And the diesel is, of course, for both road and also for the maritime shipping. And we look at how we actually interact with power to liquid, so e-fuels, and where synergies can be found. A particular focus is also on how can the biofuel production technologies actually integrate with what we call bioenergy capture, carbon capture, utilization, and storage, so that we actually have negative emissions and extract CO2 from our atmosphere, and then by that way help to achieve a net zero or climate neutral future. To give you an overview of which countries are actually active on the specific heavy-duty and jet fuel sectors, these are some names. You can also see our colleague Marco Boffi, who was originally planning to give the presentation here, but we have a very international setting of experts involved in it, and I invite you to actually contact them if you want any questions. In the end, I will share my email address, so you can also contact me and I will guide you to these people. Then we look indeed in a biofuels implementation agenda on all kinds of topics, and it can be very specific policies, the special research efforts and strategies, market deployment, how do all these options contribute to greenhouse gas emissions or to the reduction of that, and what is upcoming in policies and in certification schemes. Now, a little bit on the market and policy context for SAF in the European Union. We know, of course, Europe has all these climate actions, is about repowering and becoming also energy resilient, tackling clean industry. The Net Zero Industry Act is an important one, but there's a whole package, and sometimes it's quite difficult to actually get lost a bit in this. So here we give you an overview of what actually are policies that are specifically on transport. On national implementation, we see Renewable Energy Directive, Energy Taxation Directive, effort sharing regulations, and the sectors that these all relate to. But then we have these international territory items, FuelEU Maritime, the ReFuelEU Aviation, and that's where SAF comes in, of course. But I want to show you how all of this is integrated with each other and how we can make sure that we are not going to find silo solutions which might be suboptimal. And then, of course, within that, we have this European market mechanism, the emission trading system that also covers the international aviation sector. I think we will share the screen, the slides afterwards, so I'll give you not in all these details of numbers. I just want to continue with the next. It is important to understand how SAF and aviation sector relates to, let's say, the total energy consumption in Europe. So what you see here is actually the block on the vertical axis. You see what is actually the share of each of the sectors in the total energy consumption. And you can see that transport, and this is only national territory. So it excludes international aviation and it excludes international maritime. Transport is the biggest sector, followed by the households in energy consumption and industry. And the colors indicate what is actually the type of energy being used in that sector. And there you see that in many sectors, electricity, which is represented by this red color, has already a very high share in the total system. In transport, however, it's oil and petroleum products that are dominant. There's a bit of renewable fuels in it, and that's mainly biofuels, of course. And the electricity that you see here in this part is only actually the electricity used in the rail sector, not even in the road sector. So electrification is still going slow in that sector. But for you, it's important to understand that when we take a look at how much fuel is used in the aviation sector in Europe, including international flights, and also the maritime sectors, then we see that these are moderate, small volumes. It's important to understand that when we talk about the mandates of 2% now for aviation sector, 6% by 2030. Because in the transport sector as a whole, it has a very small share yet. Now, here I took in a different way of showing the transport sector. So the road sector on the one hand side, including rail, the shipping sector of its bunkered fuel, and the aviation sector. So here you see the total volumes of these sectors. Well, the Renewable Energy Directive demands by 2030 that about, let's say, 29% of renewable energy is being used. Much of that is double counted, but for the total sector in Europe, that means around 65 million tons of oil equivalent. And at the same time, in 2030, you see that there is a 6% greenhouse gas reduction target for the maritime sector and a 6% share of SAF being used in the transport sector. But these two are small portions in that total volume. And so the squares, the rectangles actually also represent the total volume. So you see these are small components in that 2030 target. And of course, we talked about it before, these 6% shares of SAF do have their challenges, but you have to see them that they also count for parts in the Renewable Energy Directive. Now, how does it look like? I mean, there are different regulations in place. In the maritime sector, it is focused on reducing the greenhouse gas intensity, and we are now in the situation here that we want to have a 2% lower CO2 intensity compared to the reference value that is about 91 grams CO2 per megajoule. And over time, it will fall down quickly, slowly, but in the end, up to 80% reduction by the year 2050. And that has a competing fuel demand, renewable fuel demand, compared to the aviation sector. And in the aviation sector, the graph on the right-hand side, you see that we're now increasing the shares of of sustainable aviation fuels, of SAF, with 2% from 25 onwards, going higher and higher, and also introducing shares of eSAF in the total mix. And by 2050, 70% of the total fuels used in the aviation sector in Europe should be SAF, and half of that should then be eSAF, and the other half will then be bio-based SAF. Now, well, it is important to understand that when we see what is needed in road transport sector in majority, by 2030, this 65 million tons of oil equivalent, it will mainly be used in that sector, and it will, because the electrification in the road sector by 2030 is very limited yet. This block of green at the bottom will mainly be renewable fuels. And what is now surprising is that when we take a look at how much will that volume of 70% in SAF in the aviation sector, and let's say this 80% reduction in greenhouse gas intensity in the maritime sector, in total mean that then in 2050 we would need around 60 million tons of renewable fuels. And that is almost the same volume of the volume that we actually needed already in 2030 for the total sector. So that means that we actually can build capacity for fuels in Europe, that we somehow have to find a way, while electrification goes on in the road sector, we can actually bring those fuels over time to these maritime and aviation sector. And I think by considering this and going outside the silo of maritime and outside the silo of the sustainable aviation fuels, we can find ways to optimize this capacity buildup that is needed in the road transport sector that will last quite some time, and see how, for instance, Heuvel can use the HVO plants capacity as well, how to synergize this and optimize this transition within the sectors while electrification is ongoing in the road transport sector. I don't hear that story very often, but I think this is a topic that we in IEA Bioenergy try to understand. How can we bring this forward and understand it? Now, well, in 2024, the European Commission had a very nice report, and I think it's important to understand, well, what is actually the need for industrial capacity for drop-in advanced biofuels. And actually what this show, and I grouped some of the information. This is for the main technologies that we're in, the current production capacity that we would need to comply for the fuel demand in 2023, mainly transesterification, FAME, hydrotreatment, HVO, ethanol fermentation, mainly on food and feed crop-based biofuels. Now, well, with the demands in 2030, sorry that the title still says 2023, it is about 2030, we need expansion, and we see that the expansion is in majority, of course, an expansion of the frame technologies and the HVO technologies in road transport sector, but we do see other sectors, the more mature technologies, coming up as well. And then when we have a look at 2050, we see that, let's say, these top two layers are no longer really expanding, except for the hydrotreatment, which may produce some HEFA, but we see the methane technologies coming up for shipping. That's quite important, but also advanced ethanol and alcohol to jet, and also gasification-based routes, meaning Fischer-Tropsch technology. So we see there is a need for buildup of technology that might be very well equipped also to serve for the supply of demand in these aviation sectors. Now, I leave out that graph for the moment. Now, well, we've seen that, let's say, there are four dominant pathways for aviation fuels: the HEFA pathway, the alcohol to jet pathway, the syngas pathway and the power-to-jet pathway, seen as those that will come in hand first, and we are now dominant in HEFA. But what we do see as well is that there is all kinds of optimization among them. And we need that optimization as well, because when we take a look at what are now the plants based in Europe that are, let's say, producing in operation or under construction or having FID, then we see that up to 2035, it seems that these are okay. I mean, more than, let's say, the mandated volumes that are represented here in the gray part, though we do still lack the e-fuels components in it, because there will be e-mandates from 2030 onwards, and there are not yet operational power-to-liquid plants or even known construction PTL plants, or actually those that have taken FID. So there is an issue in Europe. But the bio-based ones are able to deliver the mandates up to 2034, but would still also be insured in 2035. So we need to build up in more the technologies, because this is all HEFA-based, and alcohol-to-jet or fish drops fuels are still not yet in place. And that's why I think we need to find optimization technologies. I think there is syngas routes will be able to deliver hydrogen to the HEFA plants. They need green hydrogen. There is a feedstock exchange between the cellulosic ethanol and the syngas. They share the same feedstocks. There is synergy of CO2. I mean, an ethanol plant has a surplus of CO2 coming out of its process that would be needed by power to jet facilities. We have pathways that have biomass-based Fischer-Tropsch sharing the same technology as power-to-jet pathways. So there's all kinds of technologies here where we can actually optimize. And we see that, let's say, there is always this synergy in the meantime, in this transitional period in road. We need ethanol and gasoline. And well, when that gasoline option then is depleted because we have, let's say, electrification, then alcohol to jet becomes a logic step. So to end my presentation, and I wanted to keep it short because we're quite late, I think what we do see in Europe is that the transport sector is actually the Achilles heel in reaching EU climates. We're behind it because still the transport sector emits 30% more emissions than it did in 1990, and it's the only sector that actually is not going down in its CO2 emissions. Industry is going down, the built environment is going down, but transport is not. And then it will become quite difficult to achieve actually EU climate goals. So we have to speed up in that sense. What we also see is that the 2030 red renewable energy volumes are much larger than the 2030 volumes equivalent for FuelEU Maritime and ReFuelEU Aviation. We have to find a way to make use of that. And we also see that the 2030 volumes for the total RED 3 are 4 times larger than the volumes we deployed in 2020. So a rapid scale up is going to be very needed, and time is running out. We do see also that based on the food and feed crop-based biofuels, we have to move on with renewable electricity, advanced biofuels, and RFMBOs, and that is similar to what we also need in the aviation sector and also in the maritime sector. So we will depend for a large part on Annex 9A wastes, and that are mainly lignocellulosic wastes. Then I think the point that I wanted to make in this presentation is that I think the road sector provides the volume to establish that scale up, the learning curve, but also the economies of scale that actually allow deployment in the aviation sector and maritime, and also actually, make the transition more easy. We have seen that there are potential synergies, and we have to explore them, and for that we have to look beyond the silo of aviation sector itself. And that actually means that the renewable fuels industry actually can benefit, to our point of view, from a collaborative development and have actually an integral multi-sector, multi-pathway investment and innovation agenda to be developed, so that we have this optimized and synergetic production capacity build-up that serves all these demand sectors in a fine-tuned way in time. And with that, I would like to end my presentation, and thank you for your attention. And if you want to reach out, please find my details here.
Thank you, Mr. Heuvel. This has been very, very helpful. If the panelists would allow, I would just ask a few questions that are still open. Would that be okay? So, Mr. Heuvel, there is a question that is there any work or initiative on to get booking claim recognition under ICA or Corsia for better market clarity and use of existing booking claim registries in view that there is limited availability of SAF in some regions?
I'm checking the question as well because yeah, there is, of course, at all kinds of national levels, is this discussion ongoing indeed that a book and claim is going to be very important. I mean, especially when you take already a look at if fuels are being delivered via the SEP's pipeline to the various airports, how can you assure that, let's say, the physical volumes would reach actually all these planes where perhaps, let's say, the specific, like in the case of DHL, the specific demand of X% SAF would be required. That is going to be very difficult. So I think at all country levels and also international levels, we are considering how to bring this book and claim recognition in place, or and find ways that we can do that in a verifiable and also unique way of reporting.
Got it. I think there was just one more question that I also wanted to ask all of you, and maybe if you could just take turns to answer. Um, is sustainable is implementation of SAF sustainability criteria a challenge, or I mean, I agree that adoption of SAF is a challenge, right? But even for people considering putting up refineries, right? My perception is that there is a lot of um, regulatory requirement when you try and go certify yourself, especially with respect to farmers, or with respect to the supply chain and proof of custody, simply because there is not enough data collection, there is lack of capability in people to acquire that data, maintain that data, and get it audited as well. Do you think that is a challenge, or do you think it is something that can be addressed over the next 2 3 years while SAF production actually scales? Mr. Muntel, if you could go first, and then Mr. Parlin and Mr. Hugh
Yeah,
could.
what we observe is that's less a question of data, it's more a question of reaching a common understanding of what sustainable fuel actually is. The EU, for example, has much more of a view on competition with food. Therefore, they favor very much the PTL way. Having a discussion in the US using soybean oil that is produced in the US is considered sustainable by all involved parties, so not necessary here in Europe. I've seen even questions here or remarks here in the questions that say, hey, why is the EU considering competitive to food? This is totally different, and there are already studies on this one. There is no common understanding of what is sustainable fuel, and nor is this definition stable. So while everybody's looking at us to make 10-year commitments into sustainable fuels, nobody is granting us that the fuel we buy today is also considered sustainable in 10 years from now.
Fair.
I would just echo what Andres said. I think that's very much what we have heard from industry, from some of the conversations, and in particular, going back to that risk report that I presented earlier, both the fragmentation in policy in terms of differences in how some of these themes have been approached by different regions and different regulators, as well as the sustainability conversation specifically, we were highlighted from them. So obviously, I don't think complying per se with sustainability requirements can be difficult. Perhaps there are some administrative efforts needed to do that, but I think companies, once they have guidance and once they have some of these tools, can indeed follow them. The challenge is when some of these criteria differ significantly across regions and create that challenges in terms of trying to understand indeed where one product can be sold and where one product can be directed. Maybe added on what Andreas was saying, there is perhaps a baseline, which is indeed Corsia and some of the criteria that have been agreed internationally. But obviously what we've seen is countries trying to go beyond that and implementing their own different ways of applying some of those criteria, adding in some restrictions, whether it is EFA caps, whether it is indeed restrictions to palm oil. All of these, then you need to factor in also perhaps consumer preferences, where, like to use palm oil as an example, in some markets it is widely accepted. In some other markets, consumers don't want to go down that product. So there are multiple factors that then can impact the company's decision to go down one particular product, one particular feedstocks, as well as all of the compliance regime behind it.
Fair. Mr. Yuval?
Yes, well, of course, within IEA Bioenergy, the teams like Task 39 on liquid transport fuels, and also our Task 45, which is on sustainability issues, addresses these things and indeed investigates these regional differences. Any questions on that we can actually dive into. That's their topic. At the same time, we do know that we have a lot of knowledge in Europe already with sustainability certification of biofuels in the road and in the European setting. I mean, that is already more than 10 years of experience, and it has progressed and improved over time. So we can learn a lot from that. It was also for that reason that actually that certification system for liquid biofuels in transport was taken as the example to actually expand it to all use of bioenergy, also for electricity and heat purposes. So there's a learning experience from that, and I think from that we can learn. And I think within the ICAO setting, it will probably try to find the shared spot where, let's say, all of them comply to. But I do also think that this is a transitional period. And I think what George also said, consumer preferences will like in many other products, that might emerge. That some people that are very sports minded would not like to be using used cooking oil, because that is associated with fast food, which is seen not healthy. So there might be new elements coming into the system that we not even are aware of. So the certification works, I think. We have seen it in Europe, and sometimes there are failures or issues that are wrong, and then they are mistaken, and we learn from it. And I think we're now about to expand it, and I think the international setting will certainly set it up. It is not about the data. I think we have lots of new technologies in place to actually make sure that the administrative burden can be, let's say, tackled or dealt with to some extent. But of course, this is an ongoing process where we should not be afraid that in the beginning it is not optimized yet to the level that we would like to have it, as long as we make sure that we make progress in it.
Understood, Mr. Heuvel. I would really like to thank all the panelists for joining in. I don't think I have any questions. We've answered most of the relevant questions up in the chat as well. In case any of the attendees would like to request anything from the panelists, may please reach out to us at the secretariat@biofuelsalliance.com, and we'll be happy to relay your questions to the panelists themselves. Any last words from any of you? Happy to hear.
Thank you.
Okay, no, fine. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you for joining in. We are doing a work stream on SAF, so we might reach out to you for some consultations and your perspective on what are the challenges for SAF. But yeah, that's all from our end. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.